is Sister Mitchell, and I will be doing my informative speech on sickle cell anemia. Why I chose this topic? I chose this topic because it's very personal to me because I have sickle cell trait, to which I inherited from my father. I also chose this topic because I want to get a better understanding of the difference between sickle cell trait and sickle cell disease and what comes with both of them. What is sickle cell anemia? Sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease are odd-shaped structures of red blood cells that result in blockage of blood flow to different cells and blood vessels on the body, whereas sickle cell traits are combinations of altered hemoglobin and normal hemoglobin that results in sickle cell traits. So, in other words, sickle cell disease are blood cells that are only croissant-shaped, they are abnormal, whereas with the sickle cell trait, you have both abnormal and regular blood cells, and they're easier to flow through your body. And as you can tell from the photo up here, this is what normal red blood cells look like, and these are what sickle cell blood cells look like, which are croissant shaped or maybe crescent moon shaped, you could say. Another thing I would like to add is that if you have the disease or trait, you will know within 1 to 5 months of you being born. So if you have the sickle cell disease, you're gonna know because it's gonna attack your body and it comes with many problems and many symptoms. Who is the disease targeted to? The disease is targeted to African Americans, as you can see from the chart. And I'm not quite sure why it's specifically targeted to African Americans. I assume that is simply because all of us African Americans have a lot of things in our blood that are the same, to which we catch either this disease or we inherit this trait. And another thing I found that was interesting is that this trait is also, or disease, is mostly targeted to men. As I said, I inherited it from my father, to which I do believe that to be true, that it is mostly targeted to men. How can you get the sickle cell disease? Well, there are 3 scenarios that come with how you can inherit the disease. So the first scenario is 50% chance of you inheriting the disease. And that is simply because if one parent has the trait, you have a 50% of either catching the disease, of inheriting the trait, or not inheriting the trait at all. The second scenario is if both parents have the trait. And the trait is very harmful to your body. It doesn't do anything to you. You wouldn't even know you had it. And basically what happens is if one parent has the sickle cell trait and the other has sickle cell trait, it could combine and make the child have the sickle cell disease. So be careful who you marry if you have a sickle cell trait, and be careful who you have children with if you have the sickle cell trait or disease, because you could inherit it to your child and your child could become very ill or very sickly. And the last scenario, which in my opinion is the worst, is if one parent has the disease and the other parent has the trait. And that is a 50% chance, which I feel as though it should be 60 or 70% because it's very high risk. So basically what this is, if you have the sickle cell disease and you have the sickle cell trait and the other parent has the sickle cell trait, then the child, in my opinion, is more than likely to get the sickle cell disease. And I'm saying this because with the sickle cell disease, as I said earlier, you have only abnormal blood cells. Whereas when you have the sickle cell trait, you have abnormal and regular blood cells. And I feel as though it's like in math when things cancel each other out. So I feel as though since you have the sickle cell disease that has already abnormal blood cells, only abnormal blood cells, where you have a sickle cell trait, which also has part abnormal blood cells, it's going to cancel out and the child is going to have sickle cell disease. And something interesting that I found out with the first scenario being if one parent has the trait, then the child has 50% of catching it or inheriting it, is that, like I said earlier, I inherited the trait from my father, and me and my brother are 9 years apart, and he didn't inherit it at all. He didn't inherit the trait, he didn't inherit the disease, he has nothing at all, which I found was odd. And I did a little further investigation research, and there's nothing really to say why this or why that, but I hope the research comes up eventually. How does the trait affect someone that has it? It doesn't. As it says, no harm, no symptoms, no problem. It's like you don't have it at all. Nothing at all. There may be things in your life that pop up that show that, oh, maybe this happened because I had the trait, but that's it. How does the disease affect someone that has it? So if you have the sickle cell disease, it really affects your immune system and many things in your body. And some of the symptoms are infections, fatigue, joint pain, delayed development, urination problems, yellow jaundice, and many other things. And something else I want to add is that with having either the trait or the disease, it's incurable. You're going to have it the rest of your life. You're just going to have to deal with it. And with me saying that, I'm not meaning in a bad way, but it could be a lot worse. Having the disease or trait, they both are able to maintain, because the trait you have no problems with, the disease you have a full-blown problems, which they can be tamed and you'll be perfectly fine. And something I want to add is that I had one of these symptoms, but with me having the sickle cell trait, I had yellow jaundice when I was a child, and that's basically when you're born with some type of less pigmentation, very white, yellowish pale skin. Your eyes aren't fully dilated, they're very yellow or very white. And the doctor told my mom that to prevent this and to help it, just for me to sit in the sunlight for a couple of hours a day, 1 hour a day. And as you can tell, I'm perfectly fine now. So I hope you guys learned something from what I said today about the difference between the sickle cell disease and the sickle cell trait. And I hope you guys take that along on the journey of your life.